What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of New Orleans Basketball and New Orleans Network podcast. As always, I'm your host, Raphael Rattler, joined by my fellow middle brother, Garrick Raphael. What's popping with you, bro? You still remember how to do this?
Man. Let me tell you, it's been a while, man. I tell you, if doing this podcast is showing us anything, is that life be life. But yeah, man, I still remember how to do this. I still remember how to talk about the Pelicans. Feel like it's only been like a week, but like it's felt like since like the Zion hamstring, it's been like so like it was funny because I was reading the timeline, right? And of course, as you sift through the hip hop civil war that's going on everybody's timeline, you see less and less Pelicans tweets until every so often you get these reports coming out of nowhere about Brandon Ingram's contract and everything. But like before, it just seemed like there was like a civil war on the timeline of people who were like, do you want the Pelicans to win game 3 and extend the series and put up the fight? And then they had some people that was like the New Jack City meme where they was just holding a gun crying, just like in it all. But I think it is the offseason is upon us. And I think, this will be the offseason where we see some things happening. So we'll get into that. But it just feels so weird to have basketball, Pelicans basketball seem like every other day. And then now it's just like, you get one playoff game today. But things are happening. But the WNBA is starting off their preseason. Yeah, right. Caitlin Clark had her first.
They came out with a bang in the WNBA.
You know what I'm saying? She had to let the old guards know it. So I'm looking forward to that. Shout out to Angel Reese having her first game, almost knocking on the door of a double-double. That's what she do. Mrs. Double-double. That's what she does. So I'm excited, man. I'm excited to welcome the WNBA into their new season, but still living in the moment of these NBA playoff games, man. So how's everything on your side? First of all, shout out to Julian. Happy birthday from Uncle G. Love you to death, man. How's everything on your side?
Yes, sir. Besides craziness in the world and in life, shout out to my son turning 6. Crazy, man. We are getting old, bro.
6.
We are getting old quick.
Do you remember when you sent me the text message saying, people who know us, the one of the greatest text messages exchanges came because of my nephew, where my brother, you got to know me. I'm a child at heart. My brother texted me and was like, your nephew might be coming. It might be Braxton Hicks. And I thought, shout out to Lindsay, I thought that's what you were naming I thought you were naming my nephew Braxton Hicks. I'm like, that's a real football name. And that text message exchange will live in infamy. But yes, we are getting old. Shout out to Juju.
Nah, but you're absolutely right. And, I feel as if it's wild. Dad came and visited, for the birthday party. He walked in the door, and the first thing he said was, well, what's the team going to do to improve? And I'm thinking, man, the NFL draft just happened. He must be talking about the Saints. And he was immediately talking about the Pelicans. And that kind of talks to, you got to know our father. Our father is like a football junkie to his life. Like, that is what he breathes on. But these last couple of seasons, he's been locked in to the Pelicans. And I feel like the city's been that way too. Just they're closer to being a winner than the Saints are from that angle. And so, it just feels as if it's been heavy these past couple of weeks that, man, once Zion go down, you kind of felt a beat. And to some degree, I feel like the Pelicans played that way too. That like, man, we don't have our best player going into the number 1 seed. Larry Nance talked about it in the postseason presser. Nobody's believing in us and things like that. And from their play and just some of the moments throughout the game, you feel as if you could feel that throughout the team. But we will get into that. And before, we get started down that path of what's next, make sure you follow us on Twitter, on X, on IG, TikTok. That's NO Basketball, no E. Make sure you're liking the episode below and make sure you're subscribed to us. You and I are both coaches. We enjoy the off season where a lot of the work is done, both with roster construction as well as with with mixing and matching and growth and things like that. A lot of the work is done in the offseason. So this is kind of where things ramp up for us to some degree. But let's make sure we jump into it. So first off, talk me through the series. After game one, you talked about it. If you didn't get game one, and that was the closest one, things would feel downhill from there. So give me your thoughts of it. Again, we don't have to dive too much into it. It was a sweep. Everybody knows that from that angle. Zion didn't play. Everybody knows that. But what were some of the things you took away from this series to say, hey, this is a learning lesson for the team? We've been talking about all these years of not knowing what you had, and you have to go through adversity. This is adversity, and now you learn some things, and now you get some comments after the fact that show you that things will not be the same moving forward.
Yeah. Like you said, it the NBA playoffs are usually a 7-game series, best of 7. Who can get to 4. This series was a 1-game series, and I think game one, we talked about it going in, was the game that you wanted to get right. Like you were coming in off of a win, right, off a big win to get into the playoffs. And OKC didn't know who they were going to play into the last game, to the last couple seconds of the Pelicans game. And so they got a little less time to prepare for you. And so when you go into game one and you fight like hell the way that you do, right, and you lose the way that you do, you played about as best as you could with the guys who were available, right? You obviously going in without Zion was a huge hit for the Pelicans, but you went into that game like this is the game, and the way the Pelicans played, like you thought, okay, even if they lost this game, it felt like okay, they could get into this game, they could get into this series. However, if you really take a deep look at that game, you saw that like OKC didn't play their best game either, right? They looked big-eyed, they looked nervous, they looked like a team that had just got to the playoffs for the first time and was experiencing a lot of things for the first time. And the consensus of the Pelicans wanting to play OKC was obviously contingent on Zion playing, right? Because he is the matchup nightmare for them, right? Lou Dort absolutely terrorized the Pelicans offense because of the way he plays defense. Well, you're not going to be able to push and get up under Zion the way you are able to do against a guy like Brandon Ingram. And so that was the contingent. But if you look at it, it was like everything that the Pelicans, everything that the Thunder did, it mirrored the Pelicans just in a better way, right? Like the best player for OKC was Shea, and the best player for the Pelicans was B.I. Shea outplayed him, right? You go down to the wing players, like Lou Dort out Herb Jones. Like it was down the line, every single person. It just seemed like they played a better game than that, and that stretched through the entire series. And so when you got down to it, you saw a lot of different things with the Pelicans that they just refused to do. That OKC and Mark Daigneault, shout out to the coach of the year, that he showed a propensity to do, right? He trusted other guys. It was kind of a look at the philosophy of Willie Green and Mark Daigneault, because whereas Willie Green was more of, okay, you can't do this, so we can't, this is your weakness, so we can't incorporate you in that weakness into the system. Mark Daigneault was more like, okay, this is what you do well. We're going to incorporate that into the series. And so you saw like a philosophical difference there, and it paid off, right? You saw Isaiah Joe, others hitting shots, whereas Willie Green would not go to Jordan Hawkins. He would not go to Matt Ryan. He would not go to Dyson Daniels, even though he plays the defensive side of the ball the way Willie Green likes. And all throughout that series, you saw the Pelicans needing offense at point in times, them needed defense at point in times, and it just the guys that Willie Green trusted and the guys he hitched his wagon to and the guys he hitched this series to just did not come through for him, starting at the top with Brandon Ingram and all the way to the bottom with Jose and Najee and those guys. And so, Najee played a great game, but a pretty good series, but Najee's not going to be the reason you win a series against the number one team in the West. So it was just a lot of things. And I think the better team won, right? As constructed, meaning like no Zion. The OKC Thunder just were a more connected, or a better, more talented team. And I think that what you said at the top was right. I think the Zion hamstring, with the timing of it and what he looked like and what this team looked like, once he got injured, it just kind of took the wind out of the sails. The Pels gave it their best shot in game one. But I think, we saw what happened 2, 3, and 4, and I think that was the right outcome.
Yeah, and the thing I would kind of add to that is it's not just Zion being out. It's the trickle-down effect of what that means, right? Because to your point, if Lou Dort is guarding Zion, well, the things that Lou Dort is good at would be trumped by the fact that Zion is better at the things that he's good at. And then that also means that Lou Dort would not have been guarding Brandon Ingram coming off an injury. And everybody knows Brandon Ingram is a rhythm player. And so to get a hellacious defense, you were asking BI to come in. Not only I need you to be good, I need you to be great because Zion's not there. And that's a hard position to put him in. I'm not making excuses for him. And he came out and he was very open. And we'll talk about that with his struggles throughout the seasons. But all in all, even if Zion is healthy, I think you need Brandon Ingram to be Brandon Ingram in order to win the series, right? Obviously Zion makes the series differently. You probably don't get swept. But in order to win the series, I still think Brandon Ingram needs to be Brandon Ingram. But instead of getting the number one assignment and the number one double and the number one, you are in a much easier position to succeed. And your points aren't that much asked upon when you have Zion Williamson on the court. And when that trickle-down effects happens to CJ and Trey and everyone else, that's the domino effect of not having your best player. Look around the league. The Bucks are out of there, right? The Heat, probably were going to be out of there anyway, but they had no chance without Jimmy Butler. Look around the NBA. The teams that didn't have their best player, the Clippers, they weren't able to get where they wanted to go in the first round. And so our keys to the series were simple, and they proved to be true, right? Taking care of the ball. The Pels turned the ball over more. Who can win from the three-point line? The Thunder obviously won from the three-point line. And then who can win in the paint? Without Zion, JV was really your only consistent option in the paint, whereas OKC turned around and gave you points the other way. So, that told the stories of the series. Going into it, OKC had all the advantages. You were going to have to play damn near perfect to win anyways, much less, make it a long series. But again, I think, there was a perfect domino of the things that just happened poorly for the Pelicans altogether. Now, I want to touch on your point from Willie Green. Here was the biggest thing. We talked about it. I looked at last offseason's note going into this season. What's the number one thing you wanted Willie to be better about? It was flexibility and being more open and giving younger players longer leashes. You bring up a great point, and Mark Daigneault and OKC and several of the players kind of alluded to it after the fact. OKC got to grow together as a young team with no pressure. Shea was literally just not playing games, even though he probably was healthy enough to play games, and they were just growing their core together. Zion didn't step on the scene for OKC day one and averaged 24 points and 60% from the field. So the whole world wasn't looking at OKC where are the results right away. They didn't trade for a player who won most improved, right? Those things that happen for them. Whereas the Pelicans have been under a microscope even when Zion doesn't play from that angle. So what that allowed Mark Daigneault and the Thunder to do was say, okay, here are your skills, to your point, that you do well, and this is how we're going to incorporate into the team. This is how it's going to be. He played 11 players, Garrick. How often in a playoff series do you see a lineup, a rotation with 11 guys? That doesn't happen, right? But if you look at OKC, most people would say the strength of their team is their depth and their youth and their athleticism. Well, he leaned into that. Look, the regular season ended. This team ain't been to the playoffs. Why am I all of a sudden just going to condense my roster versus doing the things that's gotten us to this point? And you saw that pay off. Well, from Willie Green's perspective, to your point, toward the end of the season, there was that moment that Dallas home and home when you were like, okay, Jordan Hawkins has arrived. And then Jose got healthy, and and Hawk missed a couple shots, couple games, and all of a sudden Hawk was out of there. Same thing with Dyson. Dyson was coming along. He was top 10 in the NBA in steals per game, deflections per game. He gets hurt. He comes out. He's out the rotation. Najee is taking his minutes. So your two youngest players on your team, you essentially, is very similar to the Kyra and the Jackson from a year ago. You essentially took them out of the rotation the back half of the season. So then when you needed them, it was almost like a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If I play him, and Willie Green talked about this again, hey, we tried to throw Hawk in there and he didn't make any shots. It was like, well, he took 2 shots. He ain't played in 2 months. What do you expect, right? And so on the other end of that, it's the same thing with Dyson. Dyson, we've talked about the kind of cycle with Dyson. He can't shoot, gets in rhythm, plays someone, gets hot, and then gets hurt. Same thing happened here. He missed shots, so it's like we can't play him. Well, everybody else was missing shots too. And so if you're leaning in on defense, if you're leaning in on this is our best chance to win, Dyson's one of the best damn defenders on the team. And so for him to just not see minutes in a series where you are reliant upon your athleticism and your defense to keep you in the game, that's why game 1 was so close. Not playing a player like that when you're missing shots in the other end and you're playing small on the other end with CJ and Jose and they're just attacking it over and over and over, you are putting yourself in a position where your lack of flexibility is not giving you the best chance to win. And again, you don't have your best player, so maybe it's all for naught. But I think this was a growing moment for Willie Green and his staff to understand that there has to be more leniency. There has to be more openness in terms of playing young players. We talk about Kaysen Wallace. We talk about all these guys in rookie years that have played on teams that have gone deep in the playoffs. That's because they were a part of the rotation all year long. So you trusted them when it mattered. And I just don't think that trust was there. Trey says as a rookie, he barely talked to Willie Green because he wanted the rotation. Well, how the hell do you think Jordan Hawkins and Dyson Daniels feel, right? I bet you it's fairly close from that end. And so I think that's something that has to move there. So with that being said, the biggest part of all this and the biggest question raised with all this is Brandon Ingram's performance. You know that he was coming into an extension year where next year he's still on the books. He's still under contract. It's not like he's a free agent this offseason, but this is typically the time where you see a team file for an extension and show what that may be. Now, going into this season, you would think that, that's a max, no-brainer. Brandon Ingram has only improved every year that he's been in the NBA. He's gotten this team further because Zion hasn't been as available as he's been. This team loves it. Willie Green signs an extension. Willie Green talks about how good of a joy it is to coach Brandon Ingram. Well, you come out in the playoff stage and you shit the bed. And he says it himself. Like he didn't play well and he was exposed in a lot of ways from not being in rhythm and things like that. So a report comes out a couple days ago that Brandon Ingram is no longer the primary focus, not expected to get a max contract, and that the team's going to lean more toward Trey Murphy and prioritizing his extension. What are your thoughts on that? Before we kind of unpack that, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's more of a, hey, they're ready to go a different direction because they've seen these two not work? Or do you think it's, hey, look at what historically the Pelicans have been doing? Zion signed a team-friendly contract that gave them a lot of outs in case he got injured. Jose signed a team-friendly contract. Herb signed a team-friendly contract. Trey's talking about not taking the most amount of money he can take. Is it the team saying, can we get BI less than the max? Or is it them saying we're ready to move on?
Well, we heard Brandon Ingram's kind of message going into the season at media day, right? When they asked him about the contract extension and him not signing it right then and there, and basically him wanting to bet on himself, which I implore everyone to do. If you think you're that guy, bet on yourself in any part of life. That I love that mantra. Shout out to Fred VanVleet for the bet on yourself movement. But I think that's something that people should do, right? However, this is the risk you run, right? This is the risk. If you bet on yourself like Jalen Brunson, it can work out well for you, right? You can make a lot of money, go on to a lot of success, and get a way bigger contract than you would. But then there are times like what we said with Brandon Ingram, right? And I think first of all, with the report, right? It comes from I think his name is Evan. He covers the NBA for Forbes, and I would say the first thing to do is to realize that it is sources season. All right. So it's off season. You're going to hear this story, that story. And it's going to come from blue checks and all of that. So just be careful of what you read, what you consume, double check, triple check. It's better to be right than to be first. I've gone by that a million times. However, if this is something that the Pelicans are considering, then I do think that there is, first of all, I don't know if there needs to be, well, maybe there will be, because Brandon Ingram will and should try to get as much money as possible. You need to push for as much as possible. Go and bring up all the things that you've done on your contract and all of that. But this was the worst possible time for him to have the worst possible year that he could have. And when I say worst possible year, I mean, listen, he played relatively well, but for what you need from a guy who is going to be getting that amount of money in relation to where this team is and where that contract would fall on a pecking order, including to where you have all the guys behind the replacements. I mean, as ugly as it sounds, and it's a business, you have Brandon Ingram's replacement, you have CJ McCollum's replacement on the roster. They're Trey Murphy and Jordan Hawkins are there. Like, those, objectively, those are the guys supposed to come in and step in for those two players. Now, having, we always talk about having multiples of players, right? You have Trey Murphy, got CJ, got Jordan Hawkins. It works when the guys are playing and it all melts together. But as Mordo always says, another one of my favorite quotes, the bill comes due always. And when that bill comes due, now you have to start making decisions. And so if the Pelicans are considering this, then I do think that there is a bit of gamesmanship to where, listen, you did not play your best. And if you're trying to get that max, that max extension, this was not the way to this was not the production that you wanted to see. And so if the Pelicans are, I think that there is a number that the Pelicans wouldn't mind having this conversation with Brandon. Brandon is still young. He still is very, he does things. He is a very good basketball player. I just don't know if the Pelicans are willing, because if you're going head first into this extension, like, this is the team. Unless you can make some trades off, and you can probably swing some trades off, but it's going to include trading one of the guys that Brandon Ingram anyway, or Trey, or her. Like, you're gonna, in order to make, if you sign this extension, in order to make to do anything with this team, one of those guys are going to have to go. And so there is a little bit of gamesmanship there as far as, like, what is the contract that you're looking for, and, like, you need to know that we are available to move on if we need to. Like, we are entertaining that. You heard David Griffin talk about it. We'll talk about his comments. But I do think that there isn't any bad blood between the two. There isn't any we're done with Brandon Ingram. I think it's more of we have all our options ahead of us, in front of us, and we are willing to look at all options and make the right decisions for the Pelicans. And if this is a decision that they are nearing towards, then so be it. But we all knew that this was coming eventually. Like, it was staring at everybody in the face, screaming loudly, the elephant in the room, including, rotations and starting lineups and who should be playing. All of that has been the elephant in the room, but it was perfumed over by the wins, by Zion having his most game played, with all of the good juju and vibes going in. It was perfumed by, but now we're staring the Pelicans in the face, and they have to make a decision about it.
This is what I lean on when I go back to it all, and you just take the names out of it, take the people out of it, just slap letters on that. Player A, player B, player C. If I'm trading player A, who's had success with me and shown and growth and helped my locker room step up, I damn sure better be getting a better player in player B. And when you look at the landscape of the NBA, like, unless you're getting like a Joel Embiid, unless you're getting like a bona fide established star, I'm not sure what you are trading Brandon Ingram for at the deadline this offseason that's going to be significantly better and put you in a better position to win. Like, I've seen the Trae Young and the DeJounte Murray. I'm not sure that puts you in any different spot than you are already today, except you're playing with smaller players. And again, you just got exposed for playing with small players in the West that only, by the way, is only getting bigger and more athletic and wing based. So I'm not sure that's the right thing. The other thing I lean in as body language and people. David Griffin said a couple things like BI wants to be here, right? We know we got the the part right. BI said after the game, hey, I know production is what matters. But like if you listen to his postseason presser and his end of game 4 presser, he used the word we a lot. And we got to communicate and we got to learn each other better. He used the example of CJ calling him and Zion the seasons before and that kind of being a joke. But in reality, it's like, hey, we got to learn how to play together because look at the Nuggets. Look at these teams that have been together. Their best players know each other with their eyes closed, know where they're going to be, know how to get the most out of each other. We've got to get there. He talks about being comfortable with the uncomfortable. I think a lot of that is him. A lot of that is how do I morph my game to fit around the pieces that are already there versus people morphing their game to fit around me, right? I think some of that is there. He alluded to, hey, some of my more successful seasons are when we had a point guard, when you had a Lonzo Ball, when you had a Drew Holiday, guys that could set him up so he was doing more catch and shoot. You and I always talk about Brandon Ingram is the best when he's attacking the basket and when he takes very few dribbles. When he takes 1 or 0 dribble, he just rises up and shoot like a 2 guard, right? Like we've been saying. But if you look at the roster, if you look at how it's constructed, Zion's really the only one who looks to facilitate. CJ is a scorer, right? He's a scorer at heart, and Herb is a defender at heart. And so what that looks like and what that makes up looks like, I think those are conversations that need to be had. But all in all, like just from the vibe that I'm getting and the read that you're getting from how they're talking, it doesn't seem like Brandon Ingram is ready to run away. And Brandon Ingram is ready to get traded and start somewhere else. Where is he going? Where he's going to be the one option, right? Like there's so many questions that are left to be answered from that perspective. So I just don't know if it's one of those things where the team is ready to completely shift gears. And Griff even said himself, we're never going to be all one way or all the other way. It's going to be slow changes and ticks. And oh, by the way, that's what happens with teams, right? You get to the playoffs, you lose a certain way, you make an adjustment. Everybody was making fun of the Timberwolves 2 years ago for going all in with Rudy Gobert. Well, now it looks pretty damn good when you pair next to everything else that they have on their roster to fix those holes. They brought in a Mike Conley. They added a Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Shout out to him. They added things to supplant the talent they had, and Griff alludes a lot to that. So the BI piece, I think it'll be a very interesting summer for him and the team. I think that Willie Green's not signing an extension unless he thinks Brandon Ingram is going to be a part of this team because those two seem thick as thieves from that perspective. And I kind of lean that direction, whether it's the right decision or not. But let's talk about some of the other takeaways you have from like some of the comments that were said. So I thought BI sounded extremely mature in terms of self-awareness and where things are. And I kind of got that feeling from everyone down the line, whether it was Zion, whether it was obviously CJ and things like that. Trey sounded way more mature. Like if you look in comparison to past years, they just sound more established and more like, hey, I know what this is. I'm professional. And even from the Pelican side, like we talk about them just leaning too far into continuity. It sounds like, okay, we know that's not going to work. We're going to stick to our guns in some matter, but we need to make some adjustments. David Griffin saying the building's going to look different from the inside and the out this offseason. What were some of the things that stood out to you from some of the players, some of the feedback they had that was like, that'll be interesting going into the offseason?
Well, I think first of all, I think hearing someone asked BI about, do you think you and Zion fit together? And he talked about caring about winning, caring about one. They both care about winning and are committed to winning. I think that's true. I think both of the guys do want to win, but I do think that it is an inflection point for BI as we watch. As we watch these guys, the West, especially the West, be taken over by like young players, and even like the established team, the Nuggets, are led by a young superstar in Nikola Jokic, and you see Ant on the rise, and Wemby's he's gonna be there, and Luka is still there, and Shea is still there, and you see all of these young players kind of take the league by storm. Like you have to be careful that like these guys, we talk about them passing up Steph and passing KD up and passing LeBron up, that they aren't passing your game up as well. And in a sense that like now these are the guys and the way that they're playing is the focus point of the NBA and now what teams are building around. And so I think that hearing him say that, he has to be aware that like his game has to change. He has to be aware that you have to take more threes. You have to be willing. I watched Lou Dort. It was jarring, and I tweeted about it. It was jarring to watch Lou Dort completely leave Brandon Ingram at the 3-point line and come over to the other side of the floor to help Chet guard JV, because he knew that even if JV made the incredible out of the double team pass to Brandon Ingram, there's a high chance that he wasn't going to shoot that three, and that he was going to try to like dribble into you. And so you don't have to close out as far because he brings because those things have to change, right? That has to change if you're going to be playing alongside of Zion. Because listen, if JV is going to be having that much attention drawn to him, then you know Zion isn't the same pass is going to be there every time. You have to be willing to take this. So to hear him say that was fine. I think it was very, very, very telling that straight up David Griffin was like, we've seen enough of this group, of this iteration, and that we've leaned on, you know, being together and having that continuity moving forward. I think it's very, very telling that was one of the things that he said. So listen, JV's already a free agent. You're probably going to have a change there to start.
I think it's almost a done deal that JV will not be back on the roster.
Yeah. I think that is something that is going to change immediately. And so you're already going to have one big change because, you know, say what you want about JV. When you threw the ball down to him, that was a source of offense. Like it was a source of offense, and you're going to have to replace it. I said in like last year that the Pelicans and Pelicans fans really are spoiled. I liken JV to like Drew Brees in a sense of like, you don't really know what you have until it's gone. And I think JV being a constant professional, JV being there available every game, that you start to think, well, like that's what centers do, right? They just available every game and they can be there. Well, you start to look around, you're like, well, this center is missing and Jared Allen is missing and Embiid is kind of hurt. And like, you know, there's this centers are it's very hard to land on one. And so I think you're going to get, but to hear David Griffin talk about you're going to see different things. And like, we've seen enough of this team. That's very telling as well. And I think from a holistic standpoint, I don't know if the Pelicans roster is flawed, because I still think that they have one of the better built rosters in the league. I think the usage of the guys is where there needs to be a difference. I think the starting lineup needs to change. We've been trumpeting the CJ on the bench stuff. Like we've talked about all of those things. And so I do think that there's going to be changes. And when I mean big changes, I mean like there's going to be roster changes of guys that like, oh, this person used to play here, and that like there's a new person in that spot, meaning the center position, meaning like maybe Najee leaves and you have another guy that Willie likes to play. But I do think that there's going to be a change and there's going to be addressing of the things. And for as far as like Brandon Ingram goes and the comments that these guys are making about them, to be honest with you, if BI if that is the thing that the Pelicans are hitching their wagon to that is the change that they're going to make, then I think that they need to rip the Band-Aid off and do it. It doesn't need to be one of these things where they doing, oh, well, BI is in this, that. Like, if this is a situation where BI's play is something that the organization says, okay, I don't think he's going to change his play. He wants to be this version of this guy. Then we can't have that on the team, and that's not a good running partner for Zion. Then I think that is something that they need to just do and be over with. BI talked about, like, you see how Ant is taking that Team USA run, that FIBA run, and you saw it then, right? Like him kind of stepping up in a team of stars and guys who think they were kind of elevate his game. And Brandon Ingram just didn't have that same experience with Team USA. We saw it when he was playing and coming into the season. So there is going to be, with all of these comments that were made, I think that there is going to be a change. I'm not sure that it's BI for sure. But if it is, then I think they need to just go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off. You saw, Zion talk about this team and the giving the city what they deserve. And I think that it's time for the Pelicans to look themselves in the face and see all of these teams who are young and are established and are coming and are doing things. And again, there are teams that didn't even make the playoffs that are going to be a factor next season. Talk about the Grizzlies, maybe the Spurs make a move and things like that. I just think that there needs to be either make the roster change or make a philosophical change from Willie Green's standard. But one of those things needs to happen.
I would agree with all that. So let me start with Zion. Again, like we talked about how Zion sometimes sounds like an anime character during interviews, just by the way that he responds and the way that he answers things. And because he's always got a smile, he's got like a joking smile. But like over the course of this season, you saw him embrace the villain role. And in the postseason, like again, the things he was saying in terms of, hey, he was owning up to, I haven't been who I needed to be up until this point. And the Lakers game in the in-season tournament was a thing that woke me up. And the things that he said, I know where I'm going. Like that's something that a 23-year-old or 24-year-old can say versus an 18-year-old, which is when Zion walked in this building, probably can't. Right. And so when you see that aspect, again, the signs were there as he got into shape. And even his last second, his 40th point, the signs were there that the young man was putting it together. And I think that, again, the best is yet to come with a player like that. What was more likely to happen? Zion to mature at 23 or 22 years old, or to you to find someone who was more talented than him elsewhere? And I feel the same way from a BI perspective. We just talked about there ain't a long list of names that are gettable that you can trade for from that aspect. And so from Zion's perspective, again, the self-awareness and the maturity stood out to me. I talked about Trey from that angle. He talks about, I'm going to get with Jordan Hawkins this summer because I was in the same place he was at his rookie year. I didn't play much. I was pissed. But Trey knows that in order for this team to go where they want to go, they've got to have Jordan Hawkins. I see people in the comments talking about Jordan Hawkins not playing. Griff talked about it. They said, hey, you want to add a difference maker? He's like, we think we already got one in Jordan Hawkins. He was in line to be first team all rookie and all that stuff. We think we already got one from that angle. Like,
let me get this out there because that's what's so confusing about Jordan Hawkins for me. Like, we did a podcast when Jordan Hawkins got drafted, and we were excited about it because the things that he brought to the team is where, and I'm not trying to hijack the Pelicans knew what Jordan Hawkins was in our scouting report that we gave. And again, we are no one. But like the scouting report was, this guy is a phenomenal shooter and he has things to work on the defensive side of the ball. He has to get bigger and things. This was before they drafted him. When we did our guard edition of the draft last season, and we talked about Jordan Hawkins. And so you knew what you were getting when you drafted him. And so for them to say, okay, we're going to draft a guy who's a great shooter who needs to work on defense and then not play him because he can only shoot and not play defense, it just seemed like a waste of draft pick and then a waste of Jordan Hawkins' skill set to not even try to develop any of it, right? And so it's not like you drafted a guy who, okay, the tape says and the paper says that he plays defense, then he comes in and he's like garbage on defense. It was like, okay, you knew who you were drafting. And so that's part of what frustrated me about, and I can imagine with Jordan Hawkins, the fact that like you kept sending him down to the G League and he kept scoring 30 points. And it's like, well, you know he can score and you know he can, like, it just felt like a waste for Jordan Hawkins. And that was more of that's what I mean by philosophical differences from Willie Green has to change, because this is 2024. you're not going to stop everyone. You're not. And so you can't just go full on defense. You just can't. You can't go full on defense and just completely throw away offensive output. You just can't. No one in the NBA is holding people to 89 points in every game. Like, it's not going to happen. And so just the Jordan Hawkins piece was just so curious this season, because you knew what you were getting when you drafted him, and there was literally like a screaming fit for him to play, and you just never gave him an opportunity the entire season when he had skills that could contribute, and you knew what you were getting, and you still didn't play him because of the things that were wrong. It was mind-boggling this entire season. And that's what I'm talking about. When you talk about comments that the people saying, and David Griffin talking about the difference maker in Jordan Hawkins, well, he needs to tell his head coach this, the guy who got extended, that these guys need to play during the regular season, so that when you get to the playoffs, you can have, guys. And you talk about the trickle-down effect. CJ played so well towards the end of the season and got into the playoffs. Some of it was him just going through some things but if you look at CJ, he played 30 minutes, 35 minutes, 40 minutes, 42 minutes. For some of those games, you didn't have to have CJ playing 40 minutes. You just chose to do it because you would not play Jordan Hawkins. And then CJ got to the playoffs and run up. I'm sorry. I'm
hijacking your hijack.
I'm sorry.
At the trade deadline, the Pelicans were rumored to be in discussions with the Hawks. And there was a interview afterward where someone asked CJ about, like, how do you feel after the trade deadline? There's always a weird time for players and the team and things like that. And he said something that was interesting to me. He was like, I'm just happy to not have to get up and move my family again. Let me ask you this question. Do you think that trade at the deadline wasn't necessarily just Herb? It was CJ for DeJounte Murray, because everything that you just said aligns well. Like, look, what Griff had to say was very interesting to me in the post game, or in the postseason presser, where he talked about, this isn't necessarily about like our key players, but more so with how do we make changes with the players around them. And then he talked to Boston and how through stretches of the season, the Pelicans wanted to play like Boston, and they were the second best in net rating and all that. When I look at what Willie Green tries to do, he tries to put 5 players on the court who can defend and that can give you enough offense no matter how their offense looks like. And so part of me thinks at the deadline, it was like, we can upgrade from CJ or go lateral move, whatever it may be, because DeJounte Murray is a better on-ball defender. He can create for himself, and he's more of a point guard that can facilitate and get other people looks, versus CJ is more of a scorer. And to your point earlier, we already have CJ's replacement on the roster in Jordan Hawkins, and that the thing that CJ does best for this team is catch and shoot. Well, that's what Jordan Hawkins is there to do. Do you think there's any truth to that? Because I heard something like CJ wasn't a part of it, but like, it's making a whole lot more sense now that the season has kind of progressed.
Well, I think so this is, and again, this goes into the offseason and questions that are there. I do think CJ, was part of the trade. The problem with CJ being a part of a trade is that, and we've talked about that, I've asked you this a bunch of times off the pod, is like, when you really look at the NBA and you look at where it's going, and what teams are doing and where teams are, if you're trading, if CJ was to go to Atlanta, right, and he's on $33 million this year, $30 million the next year, 2 more years left. I just don't know if I'm the Hawks and I'm like, okay, I have 2 guys that are fairly undersized, don't play defense, or DeJounte plays defense, but he hasn't had a great defense. Then CJ being plugged into that, you're getting the better player in DeJounte Murray. I absolutely gonna need Herb. I'm gonna need Trey. I'm gonna need first-round picks,
and that's why the trade did.
And that's why the trade went down. And so that's also what I'm looking for in this offseason. Is like, where is CJ? I think if you ask most people, most fans, most people, in a vacuum, would you trade Brandon Ingram or CJ? Like, no other context. Which one would you? I think most people would say we would rather trade CJ because of the age and everything. And so if you're trying to get off CJ, you're looking around and you're like, okay, so I need to bring in somebody who is at least decent, because you can't just trade CJ for pennies on the dollar. To bring at least a decent player or a group of players, kind of like the Rush trade, break one contract up into a bunch of different ones. Who is like, okay, I'm going to take this 30-plus-year-old guy, getting 30, whatever, who still sees himself as a starter, but like also like needs the ball in his hand. Like he like we always talk about, when you ball him down, he likes to get buckets, likes to dribble. We've all know the CJ has the ISO. It's just where do you go, right? Like where does that fit right now in the landscape of the NBA? Like we talked about, I think CJ could be a great six man. We always talk about that. But like, I don't know if he's there yet. And I don't know if he's there with a team like the Pelicans. Like I can see him going to be like a six man for like a Celtics team or like a Denver team. But like with the Pelicans, I feel like he has some seniority feeling towards that. And so it's just, and so when you talk about that trade and Atlanta and things, listen, though that's water under the bridge, you can address that when it needs to be, get back to that trade if you need to. I'm sure the Pelicans will be attached to if the Hawks want to break up their backcourt, the Pelicans will be attached to it again, because again, Pelicans have all the assets, the young players, whatever the case, the story, yada yada. But the roster itself right now, still you have guys who can, like if CJ was flipped into the 6-man role and Hawk and Trey was starting, like then people talk about the point guard. Like we don't know if, like we saw Dyson running pick and rolls and stuff. Like you have all these different people. You just don't know, because first of all, everybody's mostly hurt. So when you need them at the crunch time, when you need to get that data, and then you don't play like the guys who you don't give them a chance, right? You don't know if Dyson is ready to be a starting point guard. We saw Dyson starting next to Herb and when CJ was out, and they look good, right? You saw Dyson do some things that look good. Jordan Hawkins has to be the best catch and shoot guy in the draft last season. You need a catch and shoot guy to start. You tried to make CJ a point guard. You tried to make CJ a catch and shoot guy, and it worked for the regular season until things went haywire and he went back to the things that made him do what he do. And so there's just a lot of things that, like, if they're just used differently, right, you might have a better roster on a better looking roster on your hands. You just don't know, right? And so I do think that there is something to, CJ was the trade, and then the Hawks were like, yeah, CJ is fine, but we're gonna need to attach Herb or Trey Arterford, and I think the Pelicans were like, not gonna be able to do it.
And look, this is not to pile on CJ. You and I both agree he was the MVP of the season.
Yeah, he had the best. Yeah, absolutely.
It was because he was asked to do things like CJ brought this up, and you could kind of tell in his responses after the season was over. CJ came here to be the third option, the third most prolific
came to be
scorer.
Alfred.
And every time throughout this season, he was asked to be the 2 option or the 1 option or whatever it may be. So he never got to be just the catch and shoot player, because while he was that, everybody was saying how great of a season CJ McCollum. He shot 43% from 3 on 8 attempts this year. Like, the things you asked him to do, he did well. But then when the games mattered, he was asked to be in a role it's not suited to make him look his best at 33 years old. And so, like, they asked Griff, does this team need a true point guard? And immediately he's like, well, Shea's not a true point guard. Start pointing around the league. And then again, I go back to the Celtics. Like, if you want to be the best, you have to model yourself at the best. And the Pels are an athletic team where their 2 best players are their wings. And so the best team to look at would be the Celtics. Look at the Celtics roster. They don't have a true point guard. Like, Jrue Holiday is not a true point guard. Like, that's not the case here. They have an athletic center. They have 2 dogs on the defensive end that can also catch and shoot. And then they have 2 guys that can fill it up, and you mix and match from there. Now, to your point earlier, and everybody's points in the comments, you are not winning in this league by holding people to 90 points. That's not going to work. The reason why it works for the Celtics and their athleticism works is because those guys also shoot more threes than anybody else in the league. And so I've been saying this for 2 seasons. You know the best way to get more 3-point shots up, because that's also something that Griff talked about in the postseason, shooting more threes than your opponent on the norm in order to win, is to play 3-point shooters. And so, like, to your point, I just think, again, love what Jose brings to the team. I think Najee Marshall made himself a ton of money. I doubt it's going to be with the Pelicans based off their cap situation. We're already talking about Brandon Ingram, much less Najee and anybody else, right? I just don't see it. I think he's going to get paid somewhere else like Max Strus did last year. And so if that's the case, you are looking for players that can defend good enough and players that can shoot threes, which you already have a decent amount of on the roster. Is to your point, are you going to put them in the best positions to win? And so, again, I don't know if Dyson's ready. His postseason comments very interesting to me as well. He wants to be more of a point guard. He wants to facilitate and get open looks for Zion and for Brandon Ingram. But he also has to be more demonstrative in how he scores and how he is aggressive toward the basket. I think this summer is going to be huge for him in the Olympics, playing for Australia. Hopefully he gets some minutes. I'm not sure how Australia has 10 players that are better than Dyson Daniels, but
Dyson can't
if he's able to get some minutes and has more freedom like Jose has playing for Puerto Rico, and he's able to get more confidence in his offensive game. Again, people said the same thing about Herb. Don't play Herb. And then he shot 41% from 3. I tend to think Dyson is built of that same brand, and that the more he works, the more he's going to get better at the things he's not good at. But all in all, again, you cannot play smaller players that are reliant upon a jump shot, and when those jump shots don't fail, what are they giving you? And then tell the people on the bench that are reliant upon jump shots that aren't as good at defense, you can't play unless you're good at you're missing something there. And so I think going into this offseason, it is going to be growth from every level, both Zion and BI. You guys have to morph your game. Zion started shooting more middies. He started talking about being on the court, which makes sense. He feels more comfortable and more confident shooting the 3. It's going to have to be both for both him and Brandon Ingram. If Brandon Ingram is here long term, you both have to shoot more 3s. You both have to open up the floor more. But then on the other side, it's going to be the roster construction. We went into last offseason talking about there's no rim protection on this team. There's no athletic big on this team. Larry Nance, love you to death. Seems like a great human. You are not 7 foot tall. Like, then nothing happened except Cody Zeller got added to the team. Something has to be different.
You're gonna put some respect on that contract extension that Jeremiah Robinson Earl got. You're gonna put some respect on
like that. No, like that's not what I mean by rim protection. So that has to be addressed. But I do think that until this team is able to figure out either the mix with CJ McCollum in the starting lineup, or the mix with him not in the starting lineup, or the mix with him not on this team, I think those are the tweaks you're looking at versus blowing up Brandon Ingram and Zion and Trey and Herb, which I would call the 4 horsemen, because that's what you need in today's NBA, athletic wings that can score and defend on the other side. Was there anything else you took away as we kind of venture in this offseason? We start looking at free agency, we start looking at the draft and trades and all that stuff. Was there anything you took back from what the players said and just how things finished up?
No, I think I just think that, you know, it is the Pelicans have been a unique team and had dealt with a unique situation since the day they drafted Zion. Zion is unique. The way the team is built is unique. And this season is like a perfect snapshot of the weirdness and the uniqueness of the New Orleans Pelicans in a season where you have had franchise records in assists and points, right? You win 49 games. You have the best road record in the NBA, and it all comes down in the West after Boston, and it all comes down, and it feels like a failure after 49 wins and getting into the playoffs. Like if you would have told, really 50, because you won the play-in tournament. If you tell Pelicans fans before the season started, Zion is going to play this many games, Brandon is going to play this many games, you're going to win basically 50 games on the season. I think you would sign up for that. You'd be like, hell yeah, like let's roll. And then you look at the context of it in this historical West. It's just been a unique situation. So the Pelicans, once again, face another offseason full of unique problems, unique perspectives, where you have a roster that's like a lot of teams, the GM for the Suns was like, if you poll all of these teams, I bet you they would switch situations with us. I think if you if you ask people about the Pelicans, GMs about the Pelicans, like, listen, yeah, you have Zion and his injury issues and all, but like you have Zion, you have BI, you have Trey, you have Herb, you have Jordan Hawkins, you have Dyson, you have Jose, you have CJ McCollum, you have all of this, like, and you have draft picks and all that. Would you trade for this? And I think a lot of GMs would be like, yes, they would. But again, it's not good enough. Once again, it's not good enough. So they go into this offseason with a bunch of unique perspectives and a bunch of unique questions that needs to be addressed. And listen, there's no perfect answer to any of them, right? If you keep BI, there's going to be the risk of this is who BI is, and this is the situation. You trade BI, you may never get another 25-year-old walking bucket coming back, right? Who knows if the player you comes back might bring you to the promised land, might bottom out in the bottom, and now you don't have Brandon Ingram to trade. Like, you just have a lot of questions that need answered, and not all of them will be answered correctly, and not all of them will make everybody happy. But at some point, this team needs to make a look in the mirror, look at themselves, and figure out the direction they want to go, and commit to it. If you can't keep telling the media, you can't keep telling the media and the fans, oh, we need to open up the floor more, or we need to shoot more threes, and then Willie Green goes out and plays Jeremiah Robinson, Earl, Jose, and Najee in a series where they can't shoot while Matt Ryan and Jordan Hawkins is on the bench. You can't keep telling the fans, oh, we need to address rim protection, and then go sign Cody Zeller and give EJ Liddell a contract extension, and then don't play them. Like, you have to commit to this and then move towards it, because there is you can't keep doing this, right? We've gone through BI just feel like yesterday BI just signed this extension, and yet another whole contract gone, and it's like you look to the left and right, you're like you're in the same position from the get-go. So you have to commit to a philosophy, commit to a team building standard, and move forward and go with it. And I think this is the offseason where you're running out of runway as far as assets and contracts and money to be given out. This past year was the year where everybody was under contract. This was the year we talked about it, to make that run. You had JV, all these other financial questions that are now staring you in the face, did not matter in this regular season. This was the season to do it. We weren't able to take advantage of it. So now you have to go forward, commit to an organizational direction, and commit to it and push forward and put everything else, going that way. And so we'll see what goes on. But I think I like the post game. I mean, the postseason presser. I think, some of the right things are said. But again, in the post game presser, we heard postseason presser last season, we heard David Griffin say we need to shoot more threes, we need to get more rim protection. And nothing was addressed other than drafting Jordan Hawkins and signing Matt Ryan, but then not playing them. So we'll see moving forward. But I think, there's just a lot of questions ahead for the Pelicans.
Yeah, the thing I look at, and again, the team still won 50 wins. Like, they still had the second most wins in franchise history. You just happen to go get the buzz saw that is the West. And so, yes, I think Willie Green has to be better and be more flexible with his roster. I think the stars have to be better, and I think you have to be better with the role players. And you're going to have to go in the tax anyway. You're going to have to be better, because you made a really good point in one of your tweets a couple of weeks ago. Zion going down is huge. Any team without their best player is huge. But the team was not set up to be sustainable if he's not there, right? Like, the Celtics could go again without Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum, and they're still going to pretty much look like the Celtics. Whereas if one of the two go down for the Pelicans, they aren't in a spot where they could just look like themselves afterwards. And I think that's the moves that are going to come this offseason. So what you got left for the people as, again, another pivotal offseason for the stars, the coaching staffs, and the front office.
As always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile today. yes, the off season is here and the questions are here. And so we're going to be covering them, as best as we can, and get into some of these answers. Again, they're not going to be pretty. Everybody's not going to be happy. Some of the guys that you love and the guys that you've been rooting for the last 4 years may not be here anymore. And so it's all about making picking an organizational direction and committing to it. So once again, thank you guys so much for supporting us and following us after another regular season down. This has been a whole bunch of roller coasters. It's like multiple roller coasters going up and down, but we appreciate y'all rocking with us through the entire regular season. We are here for the postseason. So shoot us your questions, your comments, things you want to talk about, things you want to address. Holler at us over at myself at Garrick_Rattler on Twitter. My brother at Raphael_Rattler, the page at NO Basketball. That's no E. That's on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get your social medias. Let us know what you guys want to hear. Let us know what you guys are looking for in this offseason. We'll see you guys next time.